is also similar arrangement like we always do in no need for you to say too much, just no. If you have questions, you have a
Yeah, I still don't know what about, what to respond to.
I'm sure everybody will have their own unique points.
Okay. These are the students attending there.
Hello, Wendy. No, maybe I'm stretching. Do I have something? I have a piece of shrapnel on my hip. Oh, some days like it hits my sciatic nerve, and I just go limp. It's more
Huge crowd.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I reckon a little rusty.
maybe
It's a shot in the arm and
because you have so many people that show.
yeah.
I also see them, but it's
Yeah.
Hi.
You got a name on the chair there.
I will look less like a panic about 2 minutes.
Alisa, she was really yes, and she was moderating the so she was above.
Yeah, get shot.
I got very good. Feel so much better with the
2 years?
Okay, guys.
Okay. We're gonna be able to get started, so because I could get in and out as
I told you when I
possible.
got killed, right? So that an oil, I was on an oil field, Derek exploded, the pipe separated, pressure in my head, and it was CPR. No, yeah, I went back to work that Friday.
You guys are good for whatever.
Yes. There's a seat here if you like.
That's probably it.
No?
Dr. Sark, I think you're in here.
Nope.
Oh, he's not? Come on this way.
You guys could have ripped them on and grow and getting down.
Now I gotta stand up and walk again. I write it down in the Hungarian. Let's first put the survey, and then the first names.
Or just that's what I want to look in the eye right now, but.
Yeah, you got a paper to write.
Oh, I thought I missed that deadline, so it's like halfway down.
No, you still have a chance.
Oh, it's beautiful though, freezing out.
You have until December. Maybe I should have told you that.
Oh, I was like, CSW took it, I was like, I'll take the seat and then send them it when it's done. Oh, question, if I do my own, this isn't for your class, surveying, do I need to do the city training for students or for the whole one?
Yeah, for students.
Okay. That's all I need to know.
You didn't take 30/40 with me, did you?
Nope.
Okay. Because you would have taken it, you would have done it for that class.
Well, now I have to do it so I can do all the survey stuff.
So,
It's gonna be nice.
Are you taking the survey 50 in the fall with units or, are you BA or BS?
Yeah.
Okay, well then you don't have to worry
I
about
don't
that.
need it, but I will probably for my doctorate and then I'll regret it when I do
There you
it.
go. That's why we designed the BS for students planning on graduate school.
Oh,
Oh, no, I'm just standing up.
Okay.
Okay.
The stuff in 3010 BA doesn't go to graduate school.
Oh, you.
Yeah, well, I'm studying East Asian politics.
Yeah, but we specifically designed the 3010 through 3070 to be classes to teach you things that you will need to know how to do in graduate school.
Such manifestations. Used to be the BA.
My daughter came to me in a panic yesterday because she had the BS. And she applying to graduate schools and they're all telling her she has to have a foreign language. Well, she took BS, so she didn't do foreign language.
Okay, well, let's get started so we can go on your way. Everyone needs meetings. Hi,
Hi.
I'm Melissa Thompson. I am the first female president of the Utah International Mountain Forum. And on behalf of all my students, thank you so much for coming. It really means, especially at these meetings, it means a lot when you're willing to come up here, spend some time with us too. Through my career, and I'm an old mom, so I've been around a bit.
Is he your son?
This is my son. He's four. I don't have daycare, so he's
I
my
had
favorite.
already some kind of confusion because Paulina is.
He's my assistant. It's going the right thing. One of the things I've learned is a lot of us, your speech went into this, but there's so many of us who believe there's so much anger in the world. There's so much contention. And all of us really want the same thing. We want to be able to provide for our families. We want our dream jobs. We want to be able to make a living. And the world's gotten really scary, and a lot of us feel that's impossible. Whether I've talked to people in China, Russia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, India, all of them have the same thing. We just want a good life for our children. And so here at Utah International Forum, that's one of the things we do, is we try to give a voice to those who don't have one, in particular mountain communities, because they are some of the most neglected. And so I was so happy about this. I wanted to show everybody the first time we actually got to interact with you, part of Utah International Mountain Forum, which was in 2013. And it was when the Open Working Group for the SDGs. And your speech was beautiful. So I wanted to show everybody it, if that's okay with you.
I can't remember, but.
We're going to remind you for you. And 2 monitors was made for people like me. Oh, let's see if we can actually do it.
We have about another 7 or 8 minutes. Before I make any comments related to that, maybe I'll ask my co-chair if he has any perspectives on what has been said here today, taking into account on the way forward.
Thank you very much indeed.
This is what happens when you're a mom.
And thank you all for the very, very inspiring ideas. I'm going away from here much enriched. Let me mention some of the ideas that I'm gathering from you. While we're talking about a global agenda, a global set of goals, now we are talking about the vast majority of our issues. We are talking about 48% of the global GDP, we are talking about 70% of the countries in the earth, we are talking about 75% of the global population, we are talking about the group of countries who are providing now the main engine for growth of the world economy. And I clearly hear you speaking that you wish to see for the very different challenges of the different groups of countries a very integrated approach. I clearly hear you speaking about social, ecological, and economic challenges to be tackled in an integrated manner. I also hear you speaking that solidarity should be reflected in the SDG framework within the countries and among the countries. Actually, I heard even more appeals for a renewed relationship, a renewed thinking within the countries that you might wish to see reflected. I hear your demands to see more investment into youth, education, health and gender equality, and a renewed look into relationship among stakeholders. And I also hear you speaking for the exercising of sovereignty for each and every country, and to have a renewed, rethought role of the civil society in exercising that sovereignty. I also gather from you that you are speaking about a multifaceted fragility that our countries are facing with very diverse challenges, but some of the challenges might be dealt with locally and some others globally. The globally, I gather from you, like global trade should be renewed. Climate change, common goods, oceans are issues that have direct implication to all of us, and it can be dealt with only on global level. I also gather from your notions that it is particularly important to make sure that inclusion into global markets and economic blood circulation for each and every community and each and every country is a very essential issue. And I hear a lot of common ideas from you to be reflected in the SDG framework, like gender equality should be there very strongly, a human rights sensitive approach for each and every goal, an equity-oriented approach. Poverty eradication was coming very frequently from your interventions, and what I liked very much, the economic, ecological, integrated approach of some of the challenges, and what the last speaker reminded us, when the new doctors who are about to cure diseases take an oath, and I heard that part of the oath, do know how when you plan the future. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
No? Okay. My name is Jesler Molina. I'm representing here the Utah International Mountain Forum. Mr. Chair, the Utah International Mountain Forum is a university-based coalition which has been working since the beginning with LLDC states. As we know by experience what are the challenges that these states face, and also we know that most of these states are also LDC states. Our concern mainly on this topic is that we would like to see more considerations related to the middle developing income countries, because most of them at one point, even though they graduate or they're out of the LDC status, their economies are not strong enough, or they're in ways to develop, that they feel at risk of that any kind of bad situation, disaster, even a disease attack could hurt the fundings that they're implementing for developing their country programs. We really would like to call this forum and committee to consider maybe a middle developing income countries plan. So these countries are not living alone, developing themselves. When they just went out of what is the status of LDC. Thank you.
Thank you.
He's coming in the evening.
Yes, he will be here at the reception and is really
10
excited.
years older, but
All of us are 10 years older.
Nice time travel, and fortunately I do not have to denounce what I said.
It was good. We have been honored to work with you at the Sustainable Development Goals, starting with this, and it set up a tradition for UVU students to talk with dignitaries such as yourself who come in here to show our research, what we've done with Sustainable Mountain Development, and our SEL model. We have been doing sustainable development since 2010 through SEL. SEL is where students work together as a group to solve real world issues. And then we have a faculty member who mentors us and keeps us within UN guidelines so we can advocate in a proper way. My research is really based on my home, because we all fight for our home and our families. The preamble to 2030 agenda, as you know, it says at the very end, as we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. And that one can be really hard because I lived in a rural mountain community about an hour and a half south of here. And mountain communities, even today, are some of the most neglected, as you know, and impoverished worldwide. They face food insecurities. They face 40% of our water comes from them, fresh water. But like the Himalayas, there's arsenic going into that water that's poisoning India and China, and no one knows about it. Most of the people we talk about, they say, well, you just go to the mountains for tourism. I was like, there's so many people who live there. There is 1.1 billion people in our mountain communities. But the SDGs only have 3 of 169 targets that address them, that protect them. And so that's why I joined the Utah International Mountain Forum, and why I became president, is to bring awareness of that. As I said, I live my rural community. Even though we live in a first world country, the United States is very blessed. I have seen a lot of suffering. When I graduated, half of my classmates were married at 14, 15. They had 2 kids when we walked for graduation. And I thought that was normal until I came up here. They have, the impoverished, I feel very strong about this, sorry. The poverty rate down there is 112 times more than Utah and 42% more than the United States. The difference, my research based on that, in Orem, where we live here, to them, they make $20,000 more here in income than they do down there. And that income includes their high school students. I had to work to get extra money for my family, and that's normal, but it impacts their education. And when COVID-19 hit, most of those people don't have access to internet. Only 60% of households down there do, and only 40% of high school students. So when COVID hit, they didn't have access to education. They didn't have access to their classes, yet they still had to graduate and get out of there. Not only is it hard to get, it's 250 times more expensive for half the speed. And this is really impacting our youth and our families down there. And this is why SEL is so important. It's because it relies on the community. It relies on people sharing their knowledge with one another. One of the most amazing things is teachers down there are available at midnight. When their kids are getting off school, they'll take a phone call and say, what can I do to help? Or they have an open door policy because they want their knowledge. They want these kids to succeed. And I have 5 young kids, as you can see. And what I've loved is I have been able to share this knowledge with you, with other dignitaries and ambassadors who come here. And most of them, they don't know. I talked to the governor in Utah, and he's like, I didn't realize it was so bad down there. He lived 40 minutes away in the same county, but that 40 minutes in elevation made a world of difference. So with my classmates, I say, we dedicate each semester to research of sustainable mountain development, which we share at political forums like CSW, which we have advocated at between 2017 and 2023 every year, thanks to Dr. Butler, who sponsors us there, so we can share this with the world. Both traditional and non-traditional students come and share. We don't just limit it to the youth, because our youth is so important. But there's moms like me who I don't qualify as a youth anymore for UN stuff, but I'm trying to make the same difference. I have young kids, I have experience from raising children, from being a part of the community, which is just as important. And because I have that knowledge, I can share and lead my traditional students on the proper way, teach them through my experiences and their experiences how to combine it and really make a difference. Here at UVU, we have worked with 20 representatives, permanent representatives from the UN, who visit here and give this is a tradition. Every time we get a short time to share our research, to try to make a difference one-on-one. And it means a whole lot that you're willing to do this for us, because these students, I'm so proud of. They put so much effort this last year into their research, and they feel just as strongly as I do. So thanks to the invitation of UVU, College of Humanities, Social Science, and the History and Political Science Department, we want to demonstrate SEL with you today in our research and share that with you. The folder we gave you last time too, you can see this SEL model has been highlighted by the Secretary General's report. It's been highlighted 6 times there. It's been highlighted by the Mountain Partnership. So we know it makes a difference, and we're hoping it makes a difference to you too. So today we're first going to hear from our Rotaract president, Tristan Hueri-Smith. He's going to share what SEL really works like. Next, we will hear from Dr. England, who did a healing conversation conference, and he's part of our peace and justice system, and how that works to kind of with students and to merge a better. There's way too much anger in this world. We can all agree on that. Next, we'll hear from Stefan Atkinson, who did research on Kyrgyzstan and SEL and how that works with visiting dignitaries. And then our next 2 is we will hear from Tyler James, who is a non-traditional student, who will share his research about the role of SEL for socially good artificial intelligence, which is becoming both a good and a bad thing in our world, depending whether you're a teacher or a student. And then we will hear from Hendricks, Bailey, I almost mixed you two up, I'm sorry, and Chandler Davis, who will share their research on sustainable mountain development. And we each choose a country to study and relate it to our own experiences, because globalization, we all need to understand every side of a situation if we're going to do any good. And I think that's everybody. So we will, oh, and Carter, I'm sorry. Carter will be after Tristan. I am so sorry. That's why I always do a script. He will explain the role of non-traditional students because we try with SEL to be very inclusive.
It's so beautiful. Where did you get it? Oh, no, you tell her thank you.
Tristan?
Again, thank you, Your Excellency, for taking the time to spend with us and allowing us to share how we advocate for communities through our engaged, educational student-engaged learning model, or SEL as we like to call it. Utah Valley University's SEL model encourages both traditional and non-traditional students to work as a group to solve real-world problems, with faculty mentoring us. Based on Birch's problem-based learning method, SEL has 4 steps. Students are first provided with a problem to study. We then study that problem as a group with our teachers as our mentors for our self-learning. And fourth, we carry the responsibility for our self-learning as well. A distinct aspect of UVU's model is that we use student clubs such as the Utah International Mountain Forum, which is a coalition of different student clubs here on campus. And we use that as an educational tool that really any academic institution or community can implement through SEL activities. The UN activities that we interact with are very often last longer than regular semesters and therefore cannot be implemented through traditional academic timeframes. We also rely on Rotaract, which is a student club of the Rotary International, a prominent NGO in general consultative status under ECOSOC. And additionally, our clubs encourage the participation of non-traditional students who are 25 years or older, and usually avoid these extracurricular activities. But our model provides incentives for them by allowing a flexible activity schedule, involvement of their families, and gaining recognition for their contributions. And due to that, our non-traditional students, as local community representatives, contribute to the model's skill and experiences towards SED advocacy and teach us traditional peers to do the same. As an example, the UVU Rotaract Club has been part of UMIF and has worked closely with community organizations such as Orem Linden Rotary Club and Utah Rotary District. Since 2016, UVU Rotaractors have promoted sustainable development for mountain communities in Utah and globally through SEL. For us, it is our 8th edition to the 7 Rotary International initiatives worldwide, which are education, saving mothers and children, promoting peace, fighting disease, providing clean water, growing local economies, and supporting the environment. Every year, we try to promote these 7 initiatives along with sustainable mountain development by hosting different events such as UN International Mountain Day and World Polio Day here on campus, along with working with UVU to bring and connect ambassadors and different government officials to connect with our Utah communities. And we also hold monthly local and national service projects to support these goals. We have presented at 3 sessions of the Commission on the Status of Women during 2019 to 2023. This March, we had 22 UV Rotaractors alongside Rotaractors from Kyrgyzstan, China, India, and South Sudan, all present at 2 different UN events during the Commissions on the Status of Women. Our events were sponsored by 2 NGOs, the Russian Academy of Natural Science, and I don't believe Wendy is here anymore, but Utah-China Friendship Improvement Sharing Hands Development and Commerce. Both of those are registered are accredited under the under ECOSOC. And this year we were also sponsored by the Permanent Mission of the Kyrgyz Republic to the UN and the UN FAO Mountain Partnership. Our goal is to have Rotary International also join this coalition to provide support and allow us to more successfully advocate for mountain causes through this coalition of 3 NGOs and any other mountain community that wishes to help. Based on our partnership established between UVU and other academic institutions in the Curves Republic since 2011, Rotary in Utah and the Curves Republic are continually strengthening our ties to promote sustainable mountain development worldwide. During the Curves Republic side event at CSW 67, I encourage Rotaractors from around the world to join together to make education a central part of the 2023 to 2027 5-year action plan for development of mountain regions, approved by the UN General Assembly. This year, UV Rotaractors, thanks to our advocacy efforts at CSW, was recognized as the best Rotary student club in Utah District. This is just a small testament to the impact students can make around the world in mountain regions. And I've been honored to have the opportunity to share this encouragement with our Rotaractors here in Utah, along with Rotaractors around the world. And now, of course, I'm honored to be sharing this with you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. That order. In some ways, what I wanted to mention to you really follows nicely with your talk in the other room, where you were talking about crisis transformation. And one of the concerns that we in Peace and Justice have had is how you deal with what you might refer to as the hyperpolarization that we encountered almost all levels between globally, in the United States, with gridlock in Congress, neighborhoods. There is this inability to communicate. And how do we deal with that? And our idea is that simultaneously, we would like to be able to prepare our students to engage in communication or conversations across that kind of very, very serious, deep-seated polarization in order to the notion of healing conversations. It follows in line, for example, efforts to heal race relations. You have the healing racial conversations. And so what we were able to do is we obtained some money from a grant that UVU receives from our state legislature on civics education. And we used that money to conduct a 2-day program where we bring in a set of very, very experienced mediators and people involved in conflict transformation. So this year we brought in a person who had been working with Northern Ireland and the issues there. We brought in another from the United States Institute of Peace who specializes in conflict transformation. We had someone from People First, a mediator from Chicago who is involved in racial healing, Navajo elder. And each one has their own skills at conflict transformation and healing. And we had each one of them, we brought them together so they could sort of compare ways in which they deal with these issues. And then we had each one of them conduct a workshop, a full-day workshop, where they met with a combination of students, UVU faculty, local political leaders, local clergy, and some other local leaders. We put them in workshops and worked with the individual facilitators, the experienced experts. And then the following day, we held a conference that was open to the public where we had these same 8 people present at the conference and discuss what they were learning and how they were approaching things. And the ultimate idea that we have is that we can be then training students to engage professionally in mediation and negotiation. And at the same time, we're sharing the skills of these experts with the local people to actually employ and to model for others in our community in reducing this kind of hyperpolarization. And so we now have institutionalized this to the point that each year we will be doing these healing conversations. Part of the idea is that we'll bring in different facilitators who will have different styles. We're not promoting one style, but then we'll catalog the styles and try to determine what the commonalities are and where the differences are and what styles work in particular conflicts and what styles work in other. And as sort of an extension of this, I've also been doing a study abroad to Cuba. And the basic idea there is I want to take students here who know very little about Cuba, have them live with Cuban families there, study at the University of Havana, and the Cubans then have contact with us, and we have contact with the Cubans. And so there is this kind of healing that takes place that is the sort of thing that we're trying to promote. So my students come back from Cuba, the deep love and understanding. I have students that I've taken 10 years ago. We still have friendships in Cuba. And also to have the Cubans see our students and build an understanding across the two cultures.
Okay, but could I have two reactions, which at the same time reaffirms your research, and I'm really fascinated by what you just said. On the other hand, may even complicate the picture of maybe your life. When we talk about conflict resolution, approaching different conflicts, we immediately switch to the mode that it's a bipolar conflict. And which in many cases it is truth. But you mentioned that you can apply it in local, national, international, other levels. In many cases, particularly when it comes to the big picture, the global, we tend to believe that we are facing the perspective of the bipolar world and try to solve our problems in the context of the bipolar world, but we know it's not going to be that. It's going to be a multipolar world. Even if we would be more inclined to see a bipolar structure, because all our institutions, all our thinking, past, culture, and psychological background are built to deal with bipolar type of conflicts. Now, what we are seeing is a kind of world where 4 or 5 policies, at least, are emerging, not equal. Their potentials might be very, very different, but still, this system does not behave like a bipolar conflict. So if we learn better, firstly, if we understand that what is the difference between bipolar and multipolar conflict, we might be further down the road. The second, if we equip ourselves with much more knowledge how to engage this set of conflicts, I think it might be a more successful one. Second, I fully agree, and I can reconfirm what you have said in the case of the Cuba issue. And let me bring you an example from the country I'm coming from, though I don't represent now any country, but I'm Hungarian. And like in all countries, prejudice, hate exists. You always wish to see it less and less, but still exists. And sociological studies indicated that the highest level of hate exists in cases where people don't know each other. the most underprivileged part of the society in Hungary are the gypsies, the Roma. And their so-called opponents are the far-right activists, skinheads and others. They never lived together. They don't speak the language of each other. They don't communicate and don't socialize together. But the strongest feelings are among them. So when the study came, actually many cases, it turned out that the more people learn about the other side, the less the tensions become. It's not that it solves automatically all the issues, but people start understanding, oh, is that the case? Oh, I didn't think. I was not aware. Maybe there might be another approach as well. So I just would like to commend you. And if your energies and your skills would be huge enough to have the world, please help understanding the nature of the multipolar conflict in the world, because that we are missing it, including the government in this country, including the governments in many other countries. We tend to simplify conflicts, and we believe that that will be helpful.
And part of the effort in our healing conversations is to try to bring in many of these kinds of diverse perspectives that you're talking about, so that they see it as it's not just bipolar, but the multipolarity. And in fact, one of the reasons that I chose Cuba as the site of our study abroad is because of Cuba's location, where they don't see themselves as part of that bipolar world. They see themselves in the non-aligned world, and a place where all of these different kinds of factions can come together and resolve conflict or transform the conflict in the context of the Cuban environment.
But if we insist that it is going to be a bipolar world, we may push actors who do not necessarily see themselves as an actor on the other side. We may push them to go to the other side.
And so Cuba places itself, it doesn't see itself in that bipolar place. And so it can be one of the places where you're not pushed in those directions. It's a safe place to carry on these sorts of conversations.
Congratulations.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. President. My name is Corey Gardner, and I am pleased to speak to you today on behalf of our mountainous community. I speak that the importance of women in everyday life, and especially within mountainous communities, cannot be understated. In the modern world, they still face barriers that restrict their education, distinguishing limited access to opportunities in internet infrastructure. Moreover, women principally shoulder care of the elderly, extra domestic work, and childcare burdens, all of which significantly restrain their ability to engage in educational pursuits. Through the implementation of UMIF's co-curricular inclusive student engaged learning model, or SEL, the students use group collaboration to solve pragmatic issues. Academic institutions and mountainous communities may provide non-traditional students the flexibility needed to balance their education with work and family responsibilities. It provides non-traditional or adult learners, many of whom aren't mothers, incentives to continue education, realize in SEL's inclusion of technology-based activity scheduling. As local representatives, non-traditional students contribute their experiences and distinctive leadership to group structures and the implementation of advocacy activities. This presents mountain communities with an inexpensive channel in which local, hyper-targeted, community-led projects are created and promoted to mobilize the public, empower women, build collective local power, and support their local economies. Implemented around me, SELs has been demonstrated with extreme success. SEL's inclusion of non-traditional student families and flexibility through the use of technology allowed for the remarkable guidance teamwork, and work pursuit like extracurricular leadership, such as the current UIMF president, Alita Thompson, and numerous advocacy activities and community projects. UEO is receiving dignitary investor on diet from the Kyrgyz Republic is one such example of notable student-led work that has emerged and been made possible via technology-based meetings, family inclusion in project mechanisms, and flexibility distinctive in the SEL model. Here today, you also see the results of SEL. So I thank you.
Could I ask, what is the proportion of the population in this country who you think belong to the underprivileged mountain communities? How many people are we talking about?
I would believe Alisa would have
I do have that. Here in Utah, about 40% live in rural, because the urban areas are only about Orem, Provo, all the way up to about Salt Lake. But most of southern Utah is all mountainous, impoverished areas.
All of them are socially underprivileged.
We have, so again, my hometown, of the high schoolers who are there, and they make up, they're mostly the youth, so they are probably about 30% of the population. 75% of them are on food stamps, are on free meals from the school, and most of them, because it's a farming community. So with the climate change and the lack of water, they're only able to get 2 harvests, which means they don't have anything in the winter. Kids are going 4 years without new shoes. That's why they're pulling in, the family only makes about $40,000 a year, and 12,000 of that is from students working full-time who are 16, 17 years old. So there's a huge difference, but due to the way the voting works, most of all we hear is up here, and they're kind of just a little bit forgotten, and they don't believe they have a voice or can get, because their vote matters, so they just bond together as a community and make it work.
These kind of challenges remind me challenges of some other countries.
For his class, I've been writing a paper comparing Utah with Kyrgyzstan, and the impoverished our mountain communities are very similar. And with the statistics of income, you could just line them right up, and it would be the same amount of impoverished as we see in the whole countries.
Mr. President, the problem here in the United States is neither on federal level nor on State Department, they never pay attention to the sustainable mountain development agenda, which is pursued by FAO. For the State Department, it's hidden under the ocean somewhere very deep, and they never pay attention to it. They think that this is a problem of the developing countries. That's why we don't focus on that even here, and this is a problem, big problem.
The sustainability transformation, together with its economic, social, and environmental chapters, are not developing countries. It's a program to be translated, of course, into the national realities of each and every country, but it's for 193 countries. The major difference between the MDG program, which was Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015, and the SDGs was that the MDGs were created by 10, 12 intelligent people in a dark room, created as a gift to the developing world, telling them what they should do, what should happen to them in order to alleviate some of the major challenges in those societies. The SDGs were created by 193 countries, the whole world. But they're still in the mentality of the, as you said, first world, that, okay, it's about development, so it's about the first, it's about the third world. So it's about you guys. We are fine. We're done already, our chunk of development. Now we talk about what should happen to you. in fact, if we are looking for the necessary steps for the transformation, in my understanding, the bigger changes should happen in the political north. Because our economies have a much more significant impact on the globe than those economies of the mountainous communities for the third world countries. But it's an inconvenient truth. You cannot win an election with this truth. You cannot win many of the investments saying that, okay, now we understood that we need to change ourselves first. When we negotiated SDGs, I think we briefly touched upon this this morning. I had many occasions discussing various issues with various lobby groups or advocacy groups. And there was a group of countries and other actors who were very much arguing for an SDG on mountains. And they were describing why mountains are so important. So they are the sources of water, sources of biodiversity, and so on and so on. And I kept telling them that that's fine, it's absolutely understandable. The SDG agenda is about changing this world, transformation. So tell me, what do you change in the mountains? What do you want to change in the mountains? And then they started thinking, they said, we need to change the conditions of life. I said, yes, that's it. It's about people. So formulate your agenda from the point of view of communities. Because you are not going to change the mountains themselves. And they were there, they will be there, and probably the snowpack will be there for quite a while. But how we lead with those mountains, that should
we've seen a lot with like globalization, that with the internet, everything started to be tied together. And I love that the SDGs started really kind of pulling it together. And then you saw people being scared, fear of change, fear of losing their identity, fear of losing their power within countries. And that united viewpoint that it seemed like we were going through was lost. And that's what I think with our mountains too. If we could just come between countries, and I know this is a lot easier said than done, between urban and mountain things, and everyone being able to have a voice. Everybody looking at, just because you're different and you have different needs, does not make you wrong. Let's come and have trust to make a better world together, which is what the SDGs were created to do, is make everyone on the same page. If we could battle that fear either with healing conversations or with open dialogue and have that go back to globalization where we're coming together as one, that's going to solve a lot of problems between our mountain communities, between our urban ones, between our third world, but it has to be that conversation.
I fully agree. And I don't want to derail our discussions, but it's a very, very important point. When we created SDGs, basically what did we create? A global vision for the globe, for the earth. How we would like to see ourselves by 2030 on this earth. And the 17 goals are basically a global vision. But no one is going to implement a global vision in the village or even in a country. So it was quite evident from the day one that it will go into implementation if we start translating those principles and those goals and those targets into the national and regional and local realities, because all we have different traditions, different culture, different social canvas, different natural resources, different level of development. So if we can find a way how within the framework of what we agreed on can build our priorities and translate those 17 goals into our realities, that would be an ideal case. Some countries did that lessons, some others did not. And interestingly, when now we are trying to evaluate how different countries are performing in their transformation, those who made this homework internalized what does it mean for them, the sustainability transformation, social, environmental, economic terms, those countries are performing much better. And they are much more protected against the wild globalization. Those who did not do this, and many of them are from the political north, they basically don't perform well. They remain part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Amen. I'm just gonna say amen to that.
It's interesting to see, I'm sure this is shared by the other researchers, that countries, in my experience from time, which I've studied in sustainable development course, can implement some of these SDGs at such a level where 89% of their population has access to electricity, even though 60% of rural mountains in 2017 rely on subsistence farming. And so it's interesting to see how that can change the country so much. And there's a stark difference between there, which had an even greater amount of rural individuals.
We can learn from Bhutan something else as well. And I'm not referring to the gross national happiness. It may work in the case of Bhutan, it may not work in the case of some other countries. But I try to refer to it in my talk about we do measure development in the wrong way. We try to apply a measurement system to something which it has never been designed for. All your politicians who are now very vocal about development and progress, the first indicator they use is the the GDP. Some more sophisticated politicians are using the Human Development Index as well, but mostly they are talking about the GDP. The GDP has never been designed for measuring development. Do you know where the GDP is coming from? A part of Simon Kuznets, who was commissioned to build an indicator after the Great Depression in order to avoid the next one. Where originally it's coming from? It's a military measurement. It was first designed after the First World War, between the two wars, in England, France, and Germany, when they tried to measure the capabilities of the other country, that in a certain period of time, how much raw material the given country can process, put into production, and sent to the potential front line in terms of equipment. And so it is basically measuring the material flow. Later on, it was further developed, and some services were added. But still, it is measuring basically the material flow, and it is absolutely blind to inequalities, social issues, environmental issues. The most striking example could be what happens in terms of GDP if you crash your car to a wall. It's good. It's very good. Because it creates a lot of opportunities. Let's imagine in the downtown of Salt Lake City. Let's envisage we are all billionaires and we buy the downtown of Salt Lake City, including the park. We level the park, we level all the buildings, and build a huge chemical factory in the center of Salt Lake City. What happens in terms of GDP? First, when we buy it, It's good. Business is growing. When we chop all the trees in the city, it's good because it's good job opportunities. The wood can be sold. When we start building the chemical factory, it's an excellent news for the GDP because lots of jobs, lots of materials, lots of equipments. So it actually starts boosting the GDP. And when the production starts in the chemical factory, excellent. It's quite a few percentage up in the general performance of Utah. After 3 years, there will be 2,000 cancer cases in Salt Lake City. How does it show in the GDP? Excellent news. You will need one more hospital. You should build it. Very expensive medicines to be imported or to be produced. Very expensive services to be applied. So one news is better than the other. People start migrating from Salt Lake City because they believe it's not a place for them. What does it mean in terms of GDP? Very good, because in the neighborhood, the real estate prices go up and new buildings will be created. You destroyed your capital. You eliminated a lot of values. You created something with the externalities inside it that's absolutely dangerous for the society and for the environment. So we don't measure the balance of different assets. We only measure the financial outcome of a single project. And therefore, it is not about development. It is about something else. We have to preserve the GDP because it's a very important indicator. But we have to add all those aspects and indicators which makes it possible to evaluate the development itself, social development.
Can I interject for just a second? Yes, this has been riveting, and I hope I'm not speaking because I stepped out for a minute. But one of the things that I have not heard mentioned that is a huge crisis in our state that I'm aware of is in our rural areas, we have no mental health treatment providers. We have many.
You're right. We'll just switch to you then.
Good, because we have many mental health providers, clinics, recovery centers, things like that in these areas. And they're all doing very well financially, thank you very much, and need more help. But they can't get anyone, they can't open their rural areas because they can't get any other therapists or workers to go out there because they know they're not going to make any money. They're not going to be able to make a living that their families require. And it's sad for me because there are resources that we can use, like we can use internet, but when you say things like it costs 200 times, it double what it does here, well, that takes that out of their pockets as well. So, I mean, the mental health, especially when we heard you in your speech earlier say, because it hurt my interest when you said, the chances of another global pandemic within 10 years is X, and the last one that did me in. And so many people, it changed the mental health and the mental outlook for so many of our youth and for these guys. My son is 24, so he's right in their demographic. And he has absolutely no desire to continue his education because there's no guarantee that there's going to be any reason for him to. He's just not as confident. And we used to wake up and the sun was going to come up and life was good. Something might come up, but we're getting things drastic. We hadn't been challenged in that way because our country hasn't faced war in that way for a very long time, or our own mortality the way that we did during the pandemic. And we need mental health services to be able to compensate that. And they already are ignored largely because it's like, you have depression. Well, suck it up. What's the problem? There's not a lot of understanding or compassion for mental health services anyway. Anyway, So
And I'm
Jay,
just gonna turn you right over to Tanner because he hit that right on the thing. Go.
I was
shoot.
I was gonna say,
Andres.
if nobody's researching that, you guys need to look at that.
So I focused my research on sustainable mental health development in Ukraine after the war. I appreciate you being here, Your Excellency. But due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, women and in mountain areas in particular are at an increased risk of being victimized by men and suffer from mental health problems after a conflict. They have also taken on increasingly demanding roles in childcare, elder care, and the defense of their nation. In addition, diminished food supplies, access to safe water, and adequate medical care make it difficult for expectant mothers to properly feed their growing babies. According to Dr. Henia Dadik, the head of the humanitarian unit for the UN Population Fund, this lack of food security, coupled with the constant stress of bombings and attacks, leads to large-scale preterm deliveries and miscarriages. The Interagency Working Group on Reproductive Health Crises has found that worldwide, an astounding 64% of maternal deaths, 50% of newborn deaths, and 51% of stillborn deaths occur in countries appealing to the UN for humanitarian aid. Unfortunately, these women, especially in mountain regions, are often not considered. They are frequently left out of formal decision-making processes and policy production that directly affects them. I want to express the importance of education and inclusive student-engaged learning for the mental well-being of women in mountain regions. To make sure that development in Ukraine is sustainable, it must include everyone, especially women. Sustainable Development Goal 5 focuses on gender equality and empowering women and the needs to include mountain regions surrounding the areas of conflict. These women suffering from mental health disruptions after a war cannot be excluded from the development of their country post-war, and they must be integral to its development. Being treated for mental health problems does no good to those if those who are treated are excluded from the rebuilding process after the war. Growing research has also shown that mental health problems are quickly passed down from generation to generation, damaging those who are not even directly a part of the conflict. If people are traumatized and do not have adequate treatment plans for this trauma, they can inadvertently spread the traumatic ideas and worldviews down to their children. By helping women in Ukraine now, we can help future generations of Ukrainians from suffering from mental health problems that will hinder sustainable development in the nation. These problems are greatly exacerbated in remote regions of war-torn countries, such as the people living in the Carpathian Mountains. In Ukraine, in the Carpathian Mountain range, villages such as Kryvyi have welcomed 600 refugees to their village of 1,300 people. The dramatic increase of people in such a small area has stressed their already scarce resources for the women in the mountains. When looking at the proximity of psychosocial resources, the nearest facilities are several hours away. Even before the war started, Ukraine only has 10% of the number of therapists that Canada, a country with a similar population, currently has. This significantly increases the barrier for women to seek treatment for mental health problems. However, community programs can be used to address this gap in psychosocial resources. Community programs have increased the benefit of addressing mental health, helping a community rebuild, and giving more hope for the future. This hope and community-based rebuilding will aid the widespread efforts to bring Ukraine up to where they should be economically and mentally. In my home state of Utah, there's a program known as Hope Squad, which is a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program and educational resource for the community. Hope Squad students are nominated by their peers and utilizing SEL attempt to reduce suicide and increase mental health wellness through community education, training, and peer intervention. UB Rotaractors in February of this year raised funds for Hope for Orem, a nonprofit in our city of Orem, which implements and supports these programs. It can be implemented in the mountain regions worldwide to help maintain the mental health of local women, and I hope that the United Nations can include these regions and women in their policies. Thank you.
You have raised so many big issues. Could I reflect on some of them?
Yeah.
You may know who was the hero who brought mental health into the SDG agenda.
I cannot remember their name specifically.
It was an ambassador from a very tiny country whose population can easily fit into your stadium, which is Poland. He happened to be himself a physician mostly specializing on mental disorders. And for each and every time when we were discussing different SDGs, he brought in his aspects of the mental health. And it is largely thanks to him member states understood the importance. Many of them still may only accept that this aspect is there, but what does it mean exactly for them? It is still to be unfolded. Most of the people accept that from time to time we visit our doctors. We go to a dentist, foot check. We do blood pressure or basic labs. But for many, to go for a specialist who is dealing with your mental health is something to be stigmatized. Because you go to a mental doctor because you're crazy. Not because you want to be as fit as you should, but because you are something not normal. The other aspect, coming to Ukraine, the Soviet Union, despite the fact that in many areas science was developed in a successful manner, psychology in the Soviet Union was considered as something Western pseudo-science. In the 50s, books and researches on psychology were banned in the Soviet Union. First of all, because there is no such a thing as soul, no such a thing as a mental dimension of the existence of human beings. They are only physical realities, the atoms, the flesh and bone, and that should be looked after, and everything will be fine. When they started developing their mental institutions, psychological institutions, it went to the wrong direction. It mostly went to exclude from the society these orders. Not to here, but exclude. Coming back to the war in Ukraine, I fully agree with all those notions you mentioned, the miscarriages and the big impact of the war. But let me draw your attention to another dimension of the psyche of the nation, which will state this. If there is a country whose leadership is willing to convince the other country that the other country basically doesn't exist, has no right to existence, will be defeated and will be annexed. How long do you think after the war that woman will be?
That was one of the hard things about my research, was that there's not really a specific time frame for each person, because there's some people where they can be traumatized by something that happens and they kind of put it into the back of their brain and it can show up 5 or even 10 years later. And my research was showing that after a time of conflict, about 1 in 5 people have serious mental health problems after the war as well. So I feel like it would take at least
The average experience after large conflicts between nations, that the collective conscience preserves much of the feelings, at least for 100 years. So if you expect on the day after the making the peace agreement, hopefully one day there will be, from then onwards, you can easily bet for 100 years that the Ukrainians' favorite direction is going not to be economy. And there will be hatred, there will be feelings of that sits in not only in individuals, but in generations. And I'm afraid we'll have to deal with it in the international relations.
That's why I talked about a little bit the generational trauma that occurs, because if someone's parents go through a horrible event, even if they're not trying to, they can easily pass those same feelings down to their children. And my research also found that for every dollar that a country invests into their mental health programs, they see about a $3 to $4 return in economic output. And anxiety and depression, which are two of the most common mental health effects from a war, cost the global economy about $3 to $4 trillion per year in lost economic output, because people, like you mentioned, they want to care for the physical health and they don't see the brain as something separate that's
on the campaign monthly. Here, I have a little bit of disagreement with your findings. If you look at the map of Ukraine, Ukraine is basically a flat country. Very, very few mountains, with the exception of the really western edge of Ukraine, a small chunk of the Carpathians. There where you have mountain communities, but unlike in Utah, the difference between the general level of wealth of those people in those communities and some other parts of middle Ukraine are not that big, as in the case of Utah. They probably could be different. In that part of Ukraine, the ethnic map of Ukraine is very colorful. You have many, many different ethnic communities who preserve their own traditions and who have their own villages. When a huge influx of people from the eastern parts of Ukraine are coming, they change the ethnic composition of those communities. And that usually goes through conflict. That is more important on the everyday life in those communities and in Ukraine than the level of difference between the incomes or development, the western part or the middle part. That is a very, very sensitive issue. Very sensitive issue. We're not talking about it because we talk about war. But that issue will have to be revisited.
It was difficult to find much information about, especially in like the small villages in the Carpathian Mountains. But yeah, like the war sending such a huge influx of different ethnic groups into the mountains has caused contention that there's other things that the government are currently focusing on. So that's why I think mental health and all these things will be important afterwards.
Yes, I'm next. I'm Stephens, we met earlier, so I'm president of the Foreign Affairs Club here at UVU. And through SEL model, we've been able to have the experiences of lifetimes. Like you were saying earlier, it's like you would have killed to have this experience as a student. And I went to Model UN in San Francisco a few months ago, and it was incredible to say like, oh, we were at CSW. And we were just so blessed. So thank you. We would like to thank the department for sure for all your support. And one of the things that we noticed there as students that we don't get pushed back from the faculty here to get support. Unlike other universities, they throw up roadblocks right away. Right? Here it's like, we'll help you pave the road. Like, here's some bricks, have fun. And so through that, I was able to have the opportunity to do SUG 9 research and infrastructure. So I came from Wyoming and I went to the oil fields as a youth. So I learned a lot about infrastructure really quick. And when I came here to UVU, I got taught LinkedIn with Dr. Beck, and that was just a life-changing experience. So because of that, I started doing research on the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States and saying that Utah's golden spike moment, just up the road, it was its economic beginnings. And now we have this huge economic state. It's a global leader in technology, IT, shipping, railroad infrastructure here is global, right? We were talking about an inland port that's going to be one of the largest in the world soon coming here. The infrastructure here is just world class. And I'm saying because of that gold spike moment in northern Utah, that Utah was able to have that huge growth. And if you count just the GDP, it was up since the gold spike moment to now, it's about 44,000% increase. But as you and I have talked today, GDP is a horrible measurement. And so I am attempting to compare economically Utah and the Kyrgyz Republic. Because with the Silk Road that's going through, and then also the Uzbek, Tajik, Uzbek, Kyrgyz railroads going in, that they're gonna have their gold spike moment relatively soon. And them being an economic, potential economic powerhouse in the country, it was easy to draw parallels between Utah's culture, Utah's economics, prosperity, especially like mining, infrastructure growth. And I'm attempting to compare it to Kyrgyz, the Kyrgyz Republic, and saying that these are the policies Utah had. These are the lessons we learned. These are the sustainability goals that were really useful in Utah. Or these are the things we also, opportunities we missed in Utah. And that's what my research is all been about. It's a really amazing opportunity to try to compare those two.
It's about that last year, you remember during SCO was an agreement signed, China, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia is out. And what kind of new developments will happen in Central Asia? That's why he's now studying in entire Kyrgyzstan. It'll be quite a very interesting comparison with this Wyoming, Oregon.
Yeah, and the biggest struggle I found was what metric would you compare? Because you can't say Utah laid X amount of miles of, or kilometers of railroad, and we had growth X. You can't say that. You can't just copy and paste that to another culture. And that was what I found almost right away. And that's been the struggle. So when you mentioned beyond GDP goals, it's like, that's really interesting. And that's really, really piques my interest.
Well, the world was very different 100 years ago.
Oh, that's, yeah. So it's also the data is not the same like we have today either. So what we could take though from this learning opportunity in Utah was like, we had these policies. And these are the growth we had because of these policies. And these are the mistakes we had. So hopefully Central Asia can take those mistakes and learn from our mistakes, and then they can have even maybe 5,000% growth in GDP, right? So, yeah.
Hopefully without the human cost.
Yeah, so that would be the,
Human cost.
yeah, the mine, Kennecott mine, you probably noticed that, but you can, one of the largest open pit mines in the world. And the rail systems really made that the opportunity that it is today. But also, we have a huge wheat farming here in Utah. So the rail systems were able to facilitate that.
Potato farming in Idaho.
Potato farming, yeah. And then now with this inland port coming in, there's this possibility for quick offloads to regional areas is pretty impressive too.
I used to like Idaho potatoes in New York. You know, obviously they said this is best, but maybe
Everybody does.
I need to test the Utah potatoes.
Idaho's are better, I have to admit.
So, President, I want to let you know, you probably don't know how thankful we are that you're here today. Number one, these students cannot afford to go see you one more time. Number two, the lecture you gave point out so many important solutions. The reforming of UN and the ideas that you brought out that we have to make it as the team of crisis treatment department, or whatever you call that group, and the transformation. These are the sprouting of the solution. And this place that you carry, it will bring the world very interesting answer. So for example, just the energy. This young man just talked about, he happened to be my intern. We're talking about the real cash energy. That's why the World Bank economist was interested in having more conversation with our group. Because SDGs will quickly chew up trillions of dollars every year. So if we do a quick math, say every year we need to spend 200 trillion for the SDG goal, just to be fair to everybody. And let's say it takes 10 years at least to take care of it. So it will be 200 trillion times 10, just to be very fair to everybody. Where are we going to get the cash? the energy, land, including Utah, can be the answer. So that's why when I talk to the World Bank economists, they quickly say, we want to help you. They understand the math. And I will leave that to our next conversation. Because I promise you, we are working on it. Now, these two were my wonderful interns. They have so much knowledge. And we really want to see you again. Hopefully next time, we bring some solution. We want you to be successful. You're doing a great job in UM. We're so happy.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in New York.
We want to.
I think we'll close with Chandler. Oh,
Tyler.
Tyler's sitting there looking very
No.
Tyler, we will be out of here.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. Your Excellency, if I may. As a graduate of this institution, I'm here today to support these brilliant students working to lead their undergraduate studies and advocate for sustainable member development. That being stated, I'm also here as a product of the student-engaged learning model. Mostly, well, growing up with my mother attending this as a UPSC, then UPU, and then being right across the street here at the Utah County Academy of Sciences, where we're allowed to graduate high school with our associate's degree. So basically went from junior high experience, the primary school, straight to a college environment. While Dr. Beck was not a direct instructor of mine on account of me being a philosophy major, I consider him to be one of the very few mentors on campus at the time who was able to refine my research focus in the long term. Because a lot of the research that I was engaged in was applied ethics in emerging technologies, whether that be biotech, nanotechnology, and then I extended into quantum science and artificial intelligence. So I've got my fingers in a lot of different pies and been engaged in standards development through the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. Have several standards in the wings, hopefully, that we can bring out to the IEC, ISO, so that they can get adopted and we can start engaging more in a lot of these AI-centric standards and hopefully get some for quantum development in the very near future. So going back to Dr. Beck, I'm grateful for him helping me to co-author a chapter in one of the very few books published to date that focus exclusively on the positive ways that AI can help us achieve the 2030 agenda, which we'll be presenting today here. In my opinion, AI cannot be a social good without first being accessible to the populations that will be impacted by its influence, particularly in island environments, among mountain ranges, or in regions with frequent volcanic activity. Many communities still lack the infrastructure to fully utilize the information technology and information system advances that make AI possible. To be clear, stable internet access is just scratching the surface of that overall architecture, even if it is one of the primary inconveniences that we experience on a daily basis here in Utah, even in the metropolitan areas. For example, the ability of companies to source the state-of-the-art equipment and workplaces dwarfs that of the educational institutions that rely upon, or that they're being relied upon to train the new and continuing employees as they're cycling through and growing in experience. Making talent acquisition costly and forcing migration to urban areas by mandatory at-office requirements. Another is the prevalent use of English throughout the technical literature, and particularly the use of large language models, which restricts the use and preservation of non-English language and ideas. Because as expressive as English is, it is very difficult to transliterate directly from, say, Hungarian or Japanese or Russian. You have to do a little bit of cultural background to completely make those ties link. And it is for these reasons and many others that I personally state that we must be very judicious in our use of AI for sustainable development. AI is only possible because of the data that supports it. Yet we cannot produce we cannot produce and collect enough quality data to ensure consistency in our applications. While the use of Bayesian search is useful for filling those data gaps in some applications, it is not always appropriate to use synthesized data in AI applications. The most relevant example here is the case of ChatGPT generating fictitious facts and citations when you're trying to ask it to do something for you. Beyond the use of AI for sustainable development, however, I would raise the concern that its use will also impact the basic human rights that we all enjoy under UN treaties and other mechanisms used to formalize international law. As I hope to emphasize later tonight, the UN needs to take measures that account for the rapid pace of technological development seen today, which you did touch on a little bit. We cannot wait for populations to sue for rights violations in this technological climate, as automation has accelerated the rate by which governments can take actions against one another and their respective populations. As we have seen with the internet blackouts implemented by many nation states in recent years, data collection is severely limited when it cannot be stored extraterritorially, and which results in far-reaching consequences when we do finally establish tribunals to evaluate the validity of human rights violations and the scope of them. I would also argue that the adaptation of AI into other applications, biomedical specifically, really challenges what it means to be human, and consequently the baseline whereby nations evaluate citizenship. And if we do get to the point where we question, okay, are you actually human? Can you actually be a citizen? What happens to those people that now are nationless because their citizenship has been revoked because they're super? It'll be I hate to use the word genocide, but it's very easy to go back into that environment and on a very big scale where you have these people who have the means, have the capabilities of employing these technologies into their forms. And have the wealth to support themselves. Those are some of the considerations that I hope that I can talk with you more directly. So I'll end my comments there so that we can wrap this up as quickly as possible, and we'll make myself available.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and if I may.
Thank you very much indeed.
The top sheet's just a letter that specifically tackles some of the ideas. You can read at your leisure later.
He was able to publish more than 8 or 10 peer-reviewed articles.
I think I'm up to 11 now. Yeah, I combine chapters and
Yes.
articles. I graduated in 2018, was first published in 19.
Your stamp is in Chinese or Japanese?
Japanese. The second
And even about recently about the drones, with the Ukrainian scholars. Remarkable. What he's doing, sometimes my brain is not catching up with not enough.
Which is why I'm so very grateful to you. You keep up with me even though I'm well over here.
All the best people are.
Yeah.
So they keep saying.
Last but
I
not
will
least.
try to make this quick. I know you've been here for quite a while. First, I just want to say thank you to everybody, especially you, Mr. President, for granting us your audience. I'd like to say thank you, Tristan, Aletha, Dr. Beck, Steph, and Kay for kind of being the strong forefront of like this SEL model. Student engaged learning, it's something I never really heard of until I joined this class. And it's really just presented this opportunity for us to kind of be very interested of the presence of the President of General Assembly. So thank you guys, especially all the students here who come here. So essentially, kind of what I'm going to be talking about is basically what we did in our class. I actually did research on Guinea. I joined the class, we chose countries that had mountains, the emphasis on women. And I researched around 45 articles, read them as much as I could, and kind of just dissected what's happening in Guinea, today. Came with a thesis or hypothesis that says, despite the ongoing challenges, the recent military coup and constitutional reform process in Guinea presents an opportunity for women to advocate for their rights and achieve greater representation and equality in political, social, and economic spheres. And I really wanted to connect this into like the purpose of the UN. And so by, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but to the UN's purpose is to promote and protect, peace and security throughout the world. Something along those lines. And I would make the argument that human rights, and especially women's rights as part of those human rights, are essential in the purpose of the UN, especially with the Sustainable Development Goals 5, gender equality. So I don't know if you're familiar with what's happening in Guinea, but they did have that in 2021. They had a military coup because they've been under authoritarian rule for 3-4 decades, and they finally established democracy. But the president that was in power changed their constitution to continue this reign, this rule, which forced them to have another military coup. They had multiple. Yeah, or West Africa, yeah, the Republic of Guinea. French, it used to be French territory. And essentially what's happening now is they're going through an entire constitutional reform, but they finally have, because they've gone through many human rights and many women's rights issues. Child marriage is usually more than half of the women are married before the age of 18. They go through genital mutilation, which is kind of a cultural thing. There's many human rights abuses happening in that area. And so it'd feel like a missed opportunity if I didn't try and appeal to you as the President of the General Assembly to, I know the General Assembly can't do like things that are written into law and applied and written into, would that be the word correct saying, written into law, but if there's some sort of, because I see this as such an opportunity as they're going through this constitutional reform with women's rights at some of the forefront. They have the Vice President of the transition is at the forefront of talking about the women's rights issues and keep putting them on the discussion board. If that's something that's even remotely possible for the General Assembly to, I know this sounds strange, but I see it as a missed opportunity if I didn't appeal to you as if that's something the UN could encourage, but like, because the political statements, I know the General Assembly can create political statements and things like that, and encourage some sort of human rights advocacy for what's happening there as they're changing the constitution.
The issues you brought up are not so much for the agent of the General Assembly, but for the Human Rights Council, which has a seat in Geneva. And from time to time, they have different vettings of the member states from the human rights point of view. These mechanisms make analysis of the situation in the country and make recommendations. And in certain cases, they order special investigations. So it's up to the Human Rights Council. But the problems you're raised obviously are very simple.
Sorry, fellas.
They all over. I don't say this lightly. I think I was really nervous with your station and that we might not be heard. It's really hard sometimes being a student because it is looked down. And I think if every politician was as kind and involved as you are, the world would be a much better place. I don't say that lightly. I don't think I've ever said that to any politician because I'm very anti-politician. So, but Mama, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping us learn more. I apologize that it was so long. I promised Professor Beck I'd do it in an hour and I failed. But it really means a lot to us students to be here. So thank you.
I thank you very much because I learned a lot today. I was absolutely unaware of such a huge proportion of the youth communities. Having conditions what you described. I didn't have deep knowledge of many of the issues you brought up. So I owe you a big thank. Thank you much indeed.
I only have one request, and I know we've asked a lot. We do something with UMIF too. It inspires students. I'm sure you went to Professor Beck's office and saw all our signatures. And it's.
This is which was established by the.
I should sign
Would you
some.
sign something? Yes, please. Could I have a really nice pen? It shows students that they can make a difference.
Oh, finally, I can stand up.
To UIMF and whatever makes your heart happy. They will. It would. Again, it means a lot. No, you have to go to UIMF or else you're signing to Dr. Desart. Oh, he's cool.